It's okay.
What's that?
You're up in 10 seconds.
Okay, let me get rid of my pen.
Welcome to St. Matthew's. Hello, welcome everybody. My name's Kelly Kirby, and I'm glad that you are here. You're here for a Dimensions of Faith program, which is free and open to the public, and we do accept donations so that we can continue to bring such high-quality speakers. I invite you to stay for the book signing reception afterwards. Everyone's invited to stay. And before I invite up the person who will introduce our speaker, I want to pray for our speaker myself. Almighty God, you proclaim your truth in every age by many voices. Direct in our time, we pray, those who speak where many listen and write what many read, that they may do their part in making the heart of this people wise, and its mind sound, and its will righteous, to the honor of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Jim Moore, will you please come up?
I'm the church photo geek, so. Thank you. It is a great pleasure to introduce renowned writer and historian, Dr. Diana Butler Bass, to the biannual Dimensions of Faith lecture at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. The series invites distinguished theologians, thinkers, and writers to lecture on the interface of religion and culture. Our goal is to encourage both the community and the parish to challenge our minds and to renew our spirits by hearing distinguished writers live in a lecture. We work hard to offer a stimulating and provocative forum within the Episcopal tradition of openness to diverse points of view. Dr. Bass will be speaking about her latest book, A Beautiful Year, 52 Meditations on Faith, Wisdom, and Perseverance. Diana Butler Bass is a prominent American historian of Christianity and holds a Ph.D. in religious studies from Duke University. She has been a weekly columnist for the New York Times and has also written for the Washington Post and the Atlantic on religion and culture. She has authored 12 award-winning books on faith, history, spirituality, and religion and politics. She has also commented on religion, politics, and culture on CBS, CNN, PBS, NPR, Fox, Time, Newsweek, and Rolling Stone. She is an Episcopalian. In addition to her books and columns, Dr. Bass is active on social media. She writes a weekly Substack newsletter called The Cottage. There you are. She also appears frequently on a podcast, The Convocation Unscripted. The podcast also features Louisville's own historian and scholar Jamar Tisby, who has recently been a speaker at St. Matthew's on issues of race and justice. Other podcast regulars are historian Kristen Dumez, the author of Jesus and John Wayne, and sociologist Robert Jones, who wrote The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy. Dr. Bass teaches us that we have healthier alternatives to doom scrolling on our phones or listening to hours of cable news, which leave us exhausted and dispirited. With her trademark clarity and insight, Diana Butler Bass invites us into the ancient, foundational, restorative rhythms of the Christian liturgical calendar. Her research and writing of this book took her, in her own words, on, quote, a quest to find beauty in what is perhaps a very strange place, retracing the seasons of the ancient Christian calendar, a spiritual practice also known as following the liturgical year. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Diana Butler Bass to Dimensions of Faith.
It is good to be with you tonight, and what a wonderful group. I feel kind of loved looking out on all your faces. This is indeed the place where I write. This little cottage is in my backyard in Northern Virginia, and my newsletter is named after it. My husband refers to this as the book barn because we put it up because my books started taking over our house. My newsletter, you're welcome to sign up for it. There are clipboards somewhere out there, and if you see one in the pew right at the end, just sort of pass it around so that people can sign up if you'd like to. I treasure your emails. I treat them like gold. I do not sell them. I do not send you all kinds of stuff other than my newsletter, and so you will not be besieged by all kinds of strange things if you sign up. That's my promise to you. How many people here subscribe to the cottage? Oh, my goodness gracious. Well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate you being along in my little writing place in the backyard. So that's what I'm doing mostly these days. That and the convocation, which Jim so ably mentioned, and I was going to talk about that a little bit in a moment. My new book is titled A Beautiful Year. And this is where I want to mention the convocation as well. About a year ago, I guess it was a little longer now, I was on a bit of a tour of America with my friends from the Convocation Unscripted. So it was me and my sociologist friend, Robert Jones, and these two other historians that I'm friends with, Jamar and Kristen, and we were doing democracy revivals in churches. And it was very fun. It was interesting. We went with a band. That was really cool. And we had wonderful crowds showing up to talk about how Christians can support democracy. And we were very careful, by the way. We never told anybody how to vote in the election. We were simply talking about why we voted. And I remember this one time, there was a big church in Atlanta. I think there were 600 or 700 people at this particular event, and that we had a question and answer period. And someone said, excuse me, but can each one of you go down the row and tell us what books you're working on right now? And Robbie had just finished his book on white supremacy. Kristen is working on a book to match Jesus and John Wayne, which will look at women and evangelicalism. Jamar was working on another book about race that sounded really incredible. And I noticed that all three of them had apocalyptic titles. The end of something, the challenge of something else. And it got to me, I was the last person in the row, and I said, well, I just finished my new book. It's called A Beautiful Year. And that's exactly what happened in that church, is people started laughing at me, and I went, oh my gosh, this is going to be so difficult to explain, because it hasn't been a really beautiful year. It's been a really hard year, a surprising year, a year where we've seen things sort of turned upside down, inside out, things that we never imagined we would see, a shocking year perhaps, a year that we didn't anticipate. And yet, here it is, 1 year later, and a beautiful year has appeared in the world. Now, despite this lovely title and the beautiful cover, and the fact that this church made every flower arrangement you'll see tonight match match the cover. It starts in a kind of an odd place. A beautiful year starts with a question, and the question is, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? For those of you who are not on social media very much, about 2 years ago, during the pandemic, maybe 3 years ago now, this became a popular meme, and it always worked the same way, is that some woman would grab her phone camera, somehow recording a male friend, relative of hers, answering that question, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And as it happened, men apparently think about the Roman Empire all the time. Because these little mini recordings would be of the woman saying, how often do you think about the Roman Empire, to her husband? And not only do they think about it all the time, but they can like quote battles and emperors and specific things that happened in Roman history. And what would go on with this meme as the man was droning on about the Roman Empire, the woman would turn her camera and she'd be looking like, because apparently women never think about the Roman Empire. Except I didn't get the joke. Because I have a Ph.D. in the history of Christianity, which means I actually think about the Roman Empire all the time. And somebody had to explain to me why it was funny. And I thought to myself, oh man, I really am a geek. And so I think about Rome every time I open up the New Testament, get ready to preach. I think about Rome when I'm talking about church history. I just think about Rome all the time. And then I realized that probably it shouldn't be a sexist thing, because we all actually do think about Rome all the time, even when we don't know it. Because this is another time when I think about the Roman Empire. Every single time I open up a calendar. The calendar that we still use 2,000 years later is essentially an adaptation of the same calendar that the Romans used. Indeed, the 12 months of the year, the months in which all of us were born, that mark our days, where we celebrate our holidays and our holy days, are all named after Roman festivals, Roman emperors, Roman gods, or Roman numerals. And so in reality, say here in the United States, we celebrate Independence Day, a day about democracy, about freedom, and all these things, on the 4th day of Julius Caesar. And it's like, why in the world are we still calling that month July? We're still telling the stories of American freedom with the name of an emperor. And it isn't just the months. The days of the week that we have in English, half of them are named after Roman stuff. And then about, I don't know, probably 1,800, 1,500 years ago, in English, they started naming some of the days of the week after Norse gods, because I guess that was better. And so we have a calendar, even that carried through everything that we know of what once was called Christendom, Western European Christianity, and how it reigned for more than 1,000 years as our political and social structure. We were still using the Roman calendar and Roman days of the week. This is a really kind of weird state of affairs, because calendars are made up of two things. Calendars structure how we think about time. They provide a framework by which we can communicate with one another and do business and understand, essentially, the time in which we live, or the time that we're expecting, or the time that we are supposed to show up for something. So there's structure. Calendars structure how we understand time. And calendars also tell a story. Calendars tell the story of what matters to us. And see, this is the thing that I think is weird. When you have a calendar that's still telling us a story about Roman gods and Roman emperors and Roman festivals, their stories are inhabiting our imaginations even when we don't know it. So, a beautiful year is an attempt to write a story of a different kind of calendar. And the first thing it does, and you can go at the Christian year through either structure or story, or as I'm going to do tonight, introduce you to both of these themes. But the first thing is that the Christian calendar provides an alternative structure of time. Now, why is this important? The structure of time that we in the West have inherited from Rome is a linear structure of time. It's a line. It's a year with a certain beginning, and it has a certain ending. You think about the first day, January 1st. The reason, of course, January is called January is because there was a Roman god, Janus, who had two heads. And one of the heads looked backwards, and the other head looked forward. And so the first month of the year is named after that god, the one in which time turns from what just ended to what will be. So we have that, the beginning of the story. And then it runs through the months and ends in the 12th month, December, named after the Roman number 12. So beginning, middle, and end. It has a line. This device here is a way not only to keep time, but it is also a way to tell stories. And every time I want to insult AI, I go to the internet and I look something up, and then lo and behold, it tells me something smart. And so I asked AI earlier today, just because I was curious, what are some characteristics of linear thinking? And look at this. That's all from AI. I'm so embarrassed. But it's pretty good, so I thought I'd share it with you. First of all, linear thinking, linear storytelling, a year that runs from beginning to end, puts things in chronological order. Events unfold in sequence, okay? That's one of the things that we think in the West. There's a clear beginning, middle, and end. The narrative follows basically what's called a traditional three-act structure if you're writing a play. There's cause and effect. One thing leads to another in a linear fashion. There's a structured arc to a story. It typically includes how an arc moves this way through a year, reaches some climax. The most important thing, what do we do every December right before the new year, is that the news tells us what the 10 most important stories were. It's sort of the climactic points of the year that we just lived through. And it acts as if there is going to be a resolution, but we know that there's really not resolutions. But the media acts as if on December 31st, all that stuff is going to be erased, and we're going to come up with a clean slate, and we're going to write something new. And then, of course, a chronological or linear narrative like this allows us to build suspense. We move through the year anticipating what comes next. And we tell time and history in this manner in Western culture. This is just a picture from a textbook of U.S. history. It's a U.S. timeline. You'll notice the line has gotten so long in United States history, it has to go around in kind of circles. Because it starts up there, moves down this way, we got to move through this time, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have a line that works almost like a snake through the timeline. What I think is sort of fascinating about this is that you notice that timelines, we tend to put in them the things that we think are the most important or most relevant. So you have an entire single time up there in the left corner where it says before the year 1000, and it has one arrow pointing backwards, and it says Native Americans lived as nomads. That's it. The first 10,000, 15,000 years of history in North America in one little box up there in the corner that says Native Americans lived as nomads, period. And then you start getting to the important stuff. And then you see 1492, 1607, 1620, et cetera, and you keep going through the line. And so this is a way you see linear thinking in action in a picture like this in a history book. You also see it, and here I get to make fun of my AI friends. This is something I saw just this last month from some AI guys who were telling a story about how they think about human experience and technology. And this picture showed up in one of their presentations. I love this. See, notice it's a progression, it's a linear picture of history where first people were sort of squatting down, I don't know, we're trying to make a fire or something. Then we sort of rise up just a little bit and we have clubs and we can start destroying stuff, I guess, around us. And then there's an axe, a spear. Woohoo! We're starting to stand higher because, of course, spears, we can kill things like food more easily. So we're getting stronger, we're getting bigger, we're walking then, striding across the planet in the middle part of this. And then somebody invents a book. That's not a phone, that's a book. And so we start looking like this with the book, and the book is teaching us things, and we learn and learn and learn, and then we get to invent the computer, and then finally, look at this, history is coming to its dramatic ending because we are going to have robots that are going to do absolutely everything for us, and we're going to get to relax. And this was the story of history that they were telling. I literally heard this from folks that work in Silicon Valley. And then I heard it just a few days later. I believe it came from the Vice President of the United States when he was being interviewed on CNN. This is a linear idea, a story of time that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has consequences, cause and effect, etc. Now, I would like to suggest that this is not the only way to see time. As a matter of fact, people back there at the beginning of this picture did not understand time as a line. Time as a line got invented somewhere along the way of this particular journey. Most people, through most of human history, saw time more like this, more as a swirl or a spiral or a circle. It is fascinating to me that about 100 years ago, Western people began thinking about time differently when physicists began presenting an entirely new vision of time, where time and space interweave into this kind of structure. Now, I'm not a physicist. I can't really explain all that. I just know it happened because I'm a historian, so I can read about it. And what I do know is that time is far more mysterious and far more complex than we had been led to believe as children. And that it has a different shape other than a line. The shape that I'm most familiar with time, that isn't a line, is this shape. And this is the structure or the shape of the Christian year. The Christian year does not tell time in a line. The Christian year tells a story of time that's much more like a circle or a spiral. And I love this illustration when I found it. You'll notice the structure is really pretty simple when we start talking about the Christian year. It's divided into two halves, And the first half of the Christian year is the story of Jesus. And there are 5 seasons in the first half of the Christian year. The seasons are Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, and Easter. There's a little tag of Pentecost Day where the first half switches into the second half of the calendar. And the second half of the calendar is the story of us. It's the story of the people of God. It's how we live out what Jesus did and what he taught in his life. And so 2 big halves of the story of Jesus and the story of us. The story of us part is the longest part of the year, but it's only one season. Sometimes we call it the season after Pentecost, very cleverly titled there. Or it's sometimes also called ordinary time, which I just love. It's one of my favorite terms in all of the technical vocabulary of theology. Ordinary time. Because we get the extraordinary job of living like Jesus during half of the year. And then what happens is that it spins around and starts again. And one of the things, there are many differences between this calendar and the calendar that we carry around on our phones, the Roman calendar. One thing, the calendar here has 6 seasons, those 5 that I just recited that are the story of Jesus, and then the really long one, the season of ordinary time, or the season after Pentecost. So 6 instead of 4. It starts at a completely different time, when the rest of the world is super busy going into what, I don't know what we want to call it, secular Christmas. I mean, I just love Christmas. Christmas is wonderful, no matter really how you celebrate it. But we've really built a sort of complete consumerist mythology around what should happen in December. And gentlemen here, please have pity on the women in your lives, because December might be the hardest month for women in the entirety of the secular calendar. That we are literally expected to make everything perfect for everyone else. Perfect gifts, perfect meals, perfect hospitality, perfection, perfection, perfection is what is demanded of us. It is everywhere around us in Bible studies and women's groups and women's magazines and online sites. It is an absolutely brutal time of the year. Because we have to wrap everything up so that the magic will happen for everyone else. And the only day that the magic can possibly happen is that one day, December 25th. So we rush everything to doing that. So the world is doing this, and plus you're also taking care of taxes and all kinds of other things for the end of the year. You're looking forward to New Year's. Hopefully you have the perfect date. You're going to the perfect party. You're going to have a lot of fun. You have just the right amount of wine on hand, etc. And so the whole world is rushing towards that. And meanwhile, Advent has already started. The new Christian year has already begun. It starts November 30th or December 1st usually. This year it's November 30th. And I was on a radio show recently, and someone asked me, well, how does Advent start? How does the Christian year start? And I said, in absolute silence. And and you could have heard a pin drop on the podcast. What do you mean? Advent begins, the Christian year begins with a whisper, asking the question, what do you long for? And in the dark, as the evenings, nights get longer and longer and longer, we take 4 weeks, and each week we light a candle. And I don't think it's any accident that the candle is on a wreath. It's in a circle of evergreens. and we light one more candle against the length of night. What are we hoping for? When will our dreams come true? When will the pain and suffering of this world end? When will the Messiah show up? When will there be peace on earth? We long for that. There could not be two greater contrasts to the beginning of the year. And this is what happens with the structure of the Christian year. If we take it seriously, we are called to actually live in tension with the Roman year, with the secular year. We say secular, but it's full of values. The Roman calendar celebrates emperors. That means it celebrates people who held political power. It celebrates the famous. It celebrates rulers. And all of those rulers were heads of an empire. So the Roman calendar is really an imperial device. It also celebrates military victories. One of the main flows of the Roman year was the flow of victorious Rome and the expansion of empire. And it celebrated the Roman economic system, which was an economic transactional system based on the people giving allegiance to the gods and to the emperor through certain systems of worship and tithing and taxation. And so the calendar that has become our secular calendar had built into it fame and political power, military might, and economics as all tools of an empire that would rule the world. That's the way of thinking that guides the secular calendar. It couldn't be more different than this. It could not be more different than this. As I thought about the difference, I realized that religions often have different calendars. And certainly here, there's probably a couple of people here who are Jews or are married to Jews, or their kids might be married to Jews. The Jews have kept a separate calendar for the entirety of their existence. And I began to ask myself, is that one of the reasons we still have Jews? Because every single time they were conquered, they were in tension with the people who conquered them because they insisted on keeping time according to God's time, according to the year of celebration around Passover and their liberation from freedom, and around harvest festivals and the giving of the Torah. Some of those things eventually get incorporated into the Christian calendar. The Christian calendar is a mess because half of it's from Rome and half of it is from the Jews. And we messed it up somewhere along the line because we more or less got rid of most of the Jewish parts and we only kept the Roman parts, and that is the biggest problem of Western Christianity ever. So the Jews did that. Muslims have their own calendar. Hindus have their own calendar. Buddhists have their own calendar. And these are the things that make them distinctive communities in our world, in our cultures. And we notice them being different because they think of time differently than that Roman calendar. We know that it is an absolute fact that Christianity is in decline across the West. And as it goes into decline across the West, it's calling us to ask ourselves, what does it really mean to be Christian? People ask me all the time, why are you even staying Christian? Isn't that just like hopeless? Aren't Christians all terrible bigots? Aren't you all people who are just intolerant? Mostly I know Christians because you have no time of day for the rest of us. You think that we all have to convert to be like you in order to go to heaven. How can you be part of that kind of exclusivist, bigoted religion? And I usually try to answer that question by saying something like this. See, Christianity isn't really about those things. Those things are a violation to our deepest senses of identity. And there are many ways in which our identity needs to be re-centered. We cannot expect that Roman calendar of militarism, empire, and consumerism to carry us anymore, to baby us and act as if it's sort of Christian to believe all these things. We know increasingly that in our hearts of hearts, the structure of time, the structures of meaning are different for us than the rest of the world. And so we're different. It's about a circle, a labyrinth, the halo of a Celtic cross. There are so many symbols and so much truth in Christianity that isn't about lines. It's about spirals. A couple weeks ago, I was very honored to be with John Philip Newell. We did an event together in Richmond, Virginia, and he kept talking about time being curved. And I was just going, oh man, he just wrote a whole book about that. He hadn't seen it yet. And it's different. We live in a different space, a different structure of reality. And in that structure, we get a different story. Now, if you tell Christianity in a linear way, you get a story. It's a story that many of us know. It's a story I've written about in several of my books in interesting ways. I didn't realize I was writing a story about linear time or linear Christianity, but it begins like this. In the beginning. And so usually when you talk about in the beginning and you're stuck in sort of linear Christianity, you have to start with the book of Genesis, and then you have to start by saying how creation happened, and how creation happens in seven days, and we know all the stuff that goes on there, is that there's all kinds of arguments around Christianity about whether or not a Christian can believe in evolution. The answer is yes. And how long it took, and whether or not it's the Noah's Ark thing here in Kentucky? Oh yeah. One day I'm coming and somebody's got to take me because I've never seen it. I noticed that the rector here had a whole bunch of Noah's Ark stuff, and so I thought to myself, is she kind of making a joke about the Noah's Ark thing and how the story can be better told? And so anyway, but so you have to explain this stuff, and you start at the beginning, so you have to start with creation, and you have to make a really big deal about it being a literal creation, and then you go through the whole story. You read from page 1 up to the end of the book. In case you don't know, that's not how it was written. And it ends here. That's the end. Yikes! Is that a whole bunch of people are going to go, and that's going to be their fate, and it's going to be terrible, and you better avoid it. So you have to be a Christian. You have to believe in Jesus in order to avoid what's going to happen at the end. But then you ask the question, well, what happens in the middle? I always ask some people who are quizzing me on this stuff, well, what happens in the middle? Well, they said, well, in the middle, we're supposed to make things as Christian as we possibly can. And so we have to have like a society that privileges Christianity because God says that God will bless any country that does this. And so we have to have a Christian nation between the beginning and the end. I went to an evangelical college. Believe me, I know this stuff. I still have dreams about some of the things I learned. And so you make a Christian nation, and we know that we're not the only ones doing that because people before us tried to do it too. And look at those wonderful pilgrims who came here and they got off the boat and they started to pray. And that's what we do in the middle. The people I spent time around, my teenage and college years, were linear in their thinking, linear history. We sometimes talk about it as being literal, but I've learned to think of it more as linear, which I think is kind of fascinating, because literalism is a weird category in many ways, but they definitely have developed a story that is linear in nature. And in a sense, I think that this honors their story more to talk about it being linear than it being just literalism, which for many people to say it's literal is kind of a way of insulting them. But this is really what they think. This is the way that they've structured reality. I grew up, I spent my teenage years in a church that had a chart like this hanging, no cross, but a chart like this hanging over the front of the church. And it was a map of the end of the time. And that we were in the church age, and pretty soon there was going to be the return of Christ, which was going to be the rapture, and that, it's going to be so happy because all the people in the church were going to go up to heaven, and we were going to escape the end of the line, which is really scary, and you didn't want to be around for the end of the line, except I got to confess that the teenagers in Bible study, at least the girls, we used to sit around afterwards and saying, do you really want this rapture thing to happen before you get married? Because we were also taught that you couldn't have, sorry to use this word in the pulpit, you couldn't have sex before you were married. And so all the girls were really worried that if the rapture happened before we got married, that meant we would never experience those earthly joys that God promised through marriage. There you go. And so we used to say, Lord, yes, please come, but not yet, not yet. Linear time. And when you tell a story in a linear fashion like this, guess what? You got to have a hero. And you have hero, and you have villains. The villains, the devil. The villains are all the people who resist the message of Christianity, and you get a hero. And the hero is Jesus. I had many pictures that I can choose from for hero Jesus right now. He's usually depicted in this linear story as a warrior who will arrive at the end of time with a sword on a white horse. Now, get away from those pictures. That's not this story. It's not this story. What's the most important part of the story? What's the end? Well, if you're a Hollywood producer and you're making a story about the Christian year and you look at the whole thing, you'd say, well, surely it's that big scene about the resurrection. That is the big dramatic moment. That's the end. But in this Christian year, it happens in the middle. It happens toward the end of the story of Jesus, but it doesn't happen at the end of the year. There's still another whole half a year to go. So the ending is in the middle, and the middle presents this great conflict. To me, this is in effect the most fascinating thing about the Christian year, is that it starts out here. If you think of it as a circle, it starts out here with Advent. And Advent is holding, waiting and wonder, anticipation, questions. And then time pulses in, and Jesus is born. We get Christmas. Peace on earth, goodwill to all. The angels are singing. The Prince of Peace is here, God with us, etc. And you think, maybe that's the end. Nope, that's not the end. Because what happens is, in that story, the empire comes back, and Herod shows up, And he says, hey, wait a second, I hear a prince has been born who's going to bring peace to the whole earth, and it's not going to be me, and it's not going to be my son, and so I better go out and I better get rid of all the Jewish children to make sure that this doesn't happen. And so you get this great pulse inward towards the center of the circle, towards the center of love, towards the center of light, and all of a sudden the empire tries to stop it. And Epiphany then arises from that, the story of the wise men following the star who go home by another road. And despite what Herod does, the circle is still pulsing in, and light is spreading. Light is arising. And you start with the story of the wise men, 3 guys following 1 star, and Epiphany comes to its climax on February 2nd, on Candlemas, where you read the text where Jesus says, "You are the light of the world." And the medieval tradition associated with Candlemas is that people would go to the church, take their candles, have them blessed by the church, and then they would light their candles and go out into their villages and out into the world. From 3 guys following a star to "You are the light of the world." Oh, maybe that's the end of the story. Nope. We got to stop for a moment and think about death. Lent. What is the human condition? And Lent keeps the story going more and more and more towards the center. And then comes the very center of the story, Holy Week. What you would put at the end if you're a Hollywood producer. And the big conflict here is between a table, Jesus and his friends at the Passover meal, and Jesus literally says, "You are no longer servants of God, you are God's friends." And Jesus himself, who's supposedly the king, gets down on his knees and washes their feet, because what king has ever done that in the history of humanity? And there they feast and they have a great party. It's an extraordinary night. All of their hopes that the kingdom of God is about to dawn as this new Passover day dawns. And the final moment comes where the empire walks in the door and arrests Jesus, takes him away, and sends him to his death on a cross. Is that last week, is the center of the story a story of the first feast of the kingdom and the Last Supper under Caesar? Or is it a story of the empire having the last word, that they will murder God? And that's what it looks like. It looks like that to the disciples. It looks like that to everybody who's witnessing it. God is dead. And Caesar wins again. Until Sunday morning, when one woman stays by an empty tomb, hears her name called and turns around and realizes that Jesus lives. Caesar is not going to win this time. The woman runs off to be the first to tell the news. They didn't believe her at first, of course, that's what we would expect. But for the next couple weeks, Jesus keeps showing up, and you know what Jesus always shows up doing? He never goes back to that cross. He never takes the disciples or his friends back to Golgotha, back and points and says, "Look, there's Calvary. This is what I want you to think about until the end of time. Worship this bloody hill." No, what does Jesus do? He sits down with them for meal after meal after meal in all of the resurrection accounts, and he says, "Do you have some boiled fish?" Apparently, being killed by Caesar and being raised from the dead makes you very hungry. Jesus keeps returning to the table. He's making the point over and over again. Caesar tried to run a stake through the table, And God is not going to let it happen this time. And that's the middle of the story. And so what happens is you come inward to that moment, and then the resurrection is like an explosion of light outward. See what the year does? It pulses. It does not go in a line. It's birthed. And it pulls us as humankind along with God, along with the risen Christ, into an entirely new reality. The reality was announced at the very beginning in the Advent story, when the circle was wide and all we could do was see 4 candles. And the story was announced by Jesus' own mother in her prophetic poem. People will remember me always, for the Lord has blessed me. The Lord will cast down the mighty and lift up the lowly. He will send the rich away empty and fill the hungry. That's a story where one young woman sees the promise of Caesar being thrown from his throne. And so, as the story pulses out from the grave, out from the place where Mary Magdalene and Jesus met, it pulses out as a story of love, a story of the love of God and the love of neighbor. And Jesus himself described in his own life what the end times would be, what it would be like at the very end, is that there would be a judgment, and there would be people who would not be happy at the end, but there would be a lot of people who would be sent into union with God's love at the last. And so people say, well, how will I know? What side am I on? And the righteous, it says, as Jesus was talking about this, the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? And the king will reply, and this is the most amazing thing. This is the idea of kingship that's in the New Testament. I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. That's the end of the story. If there is an end, that's what the end will be like. The poor, the sick, the infirm, the jailed, those are the people who are the court of this king. It's not a line. It's a story of love. It's a story of light. It's a story of service. It's a mystic story. It's a cosmic story. It's a story with all kinds of unexpected turns. But it's a story in which we see Jesus among us. And Jesus, the King, is most clearly seen in the outcast. I don't know about you, but I think that's one beautiful story. And I'm glad to bear it and share it in this world. I hope you are too. Thank you for your attention tonight. You're very kind, and I didn't stand up here so that you would be so nice to me, but I'm grateful and thank you for it. I do have time for 5 or 10 minutes worth of questions, and I'd be happy to take those questions. And please make them a question that I can answer quickly, Just if there's a clarification, that's what I'm really, truly interested in most. And so there's a microphone. If anybody has a question, just go ahead and raise your hand. And I would be happy to do my best to answer. Anybody got anything? I feel like I'm in a Canadian audience. Well, okay, that's fine. Oh, there is one question over here. Okay, good. He probably is Canadian. Oh, is he really?
Thank you. This is great. I wonder about, do you think that we actually don't want to see the difference of this way of looking at time because are we just too attached, I guess, to the rhythms of that linear thing that you're talking about? And even like how you describe it is like, if we see time differently, our lives are actually going to have to change, right? Like maybe our faith is going to be less about belief and more about like these habits that form us in new ways. And are we scared of that formation? It will be weird compared to everyone else,
Well, I think that in Western Christianity, certainly we got very accommodated to being the people in charge. And so the idea that we would be oddballs or different from the prevailing culture is a very frightening idea, I think, in certain societies. And we obviously see this politically everywhere in the United States right now with this whole quest to say that America has to be a Christian nation. It's like, I'll believe it's a Christian nation if you start the calendar on December 1st and you start with Advent, and take the conflict seriously that's in the middle between empire and that's not going to happen anytime soon, because what we know it means that certain people hold power and silence other people. It's a power move. And it's no surprise to me as a historian that the calendar becomes closer to its final form that comes down to us actually when you get to the 4th century. And Christianity just so much more clearly accommodates to the Roman Empire. And so by then you start seeing the full-on appropriation of the Roman calendar and taking Roman feast days and just literally turning them into Christian days. And then the Jewish calendar, the meanings of the Jewish calendar start getting lost, and the rhythms of the Jewish calendar start getting lost. And there's still a conflict, even within Christianity right now, between how you tell the time of Easter. And it's sort of an ancient conflict around lunar time versus solar time, because the Romans used solar time and the Jews used lunar time. And so the one conflict that's still left in Christianity about lunar time is the date of Easter. And that's why Eastern Church and Western Church celebrate it differently. And there's also some minor conflict about the date of Christmas. So I think it's very threatening. But the truth of the matter is, we're already there. Christians still do numerically comprise 66% of the population of the United States. But that is if you take and count every single kind of Christian and put them in one big pool. Essentially, we have no one group any longer, Protestant, Catholic, or any other form, that is a majority religion in the United States. We live in a religiously pluralistic country. And the fact that many American Christians just refuse to accept that as a reality and are living as if that is not true, I think shows the attachment to power and the attachment to those accommodations that we made to empire some 2,000 years ago. And it is a threat. And I'd say good for us. We don't have to be threatened by it because there was another story all along. And it was our fault, or our ancestors' fault, that we didn't learn it well enough to be comfortable with it. And I love teaching this now. It's countercultural. It's fun. Thank you. That's a really good question. Where are you from in Canada? Just curious. Oh, are you really from there? Okay. One time at National Stadium over the last decade, the United States, we've gotten a little bit more militaristic, in case you didn't notice, since 9/11. And one of the militaristic sort of pockets that began to develop was baseball games. And so at seventh inning stretch in baseball games in Washington, D.C., they would always have us sing and celebrate all the veterans and all the soldiers in the stadium. And we had to sing some political song that I didn't really like very much. And I would never do it. And so this one day, my daughter, every time I went to a game, she'd go, "Oh, Mom, please just stand up. Please just stand up when they celebrate veterans. Please stand up when they sing this, whatever patriotic song it is." And I said, but I can't. It goes against who I believe that we are. And baseball, for goodness sakes, baseball can't become the empire. And so anyway, one day I'm sitting in the stadium, my daughter's begging me to stand up, and this guy looks at us and says, "Stand up, lady, this is America." And I said, "I'm from Vancouver." I literally lied. Thank you for reminding me of that tender family moment. Go ahead.
If we look at the traditions that are not monotheistic, Hinduism, are they less afflicted with linearity than we are?
I don't know, because I'm not really part of those traditions, so I can't speak to that. I do know that all those traditions are affected by various forms of literalisms, in the same way that Western Christianity has been affected by literalism, and that they're fighting those things within themselves. So there are tensions within these traditions over their calendars and how they can accommodate or not be accommodated to different cultural settings. This is just kind of the work of religion and the work of culture, and it goes on over and over again in lots of different places with lots of different religions. But I do think that in particular, the Jewish example in the United States is absolutely fascinating to me, because they are a community, and the Catholics too. I mean, really, for the longest time, Catholics were incredibly distinctive. Any of people here who grew up at a time when public school systems used to serve fish on Friday, to accommodate a different religious calendar that, of course, our Catholic friends kept. And then Catholics would just not show up for certain kinds of holidays at school. They wouldn't be around on Ash Wednesday. And eventually school systems started giving people Good Friday and Easter Monday off in order to accommodate Catholic services. So the secular year has learned how to accommodate certain kinds of groups, because certain kinds of groups just made it really obvious that they were not going to just give up their religious distinctives in favor of whatever the secular calendar demanded. And so that becomes an issue now about, well, how do you bring Diwali, and how do you bring some of the great Muslim festivals in, especially the pilgrimages and the long month of fasting, Ramadan. And every time a religious group has asked for a level of accommodation in American history, there's usually been a fight about it. But then some edge of the secular world says, okay, we're going to accommodate that. And those groups have all managed to keep their sense of story and their sense of meaning and their sense of time, while also functioning within a democratic, more secular space. And so what if we begin to think about Protestants in the same way? We really should be. And we just haven't to this point. So, yeah.
We're watching a massive decline in Christian churches, and there are hundreds of churches closing pretty much every month. Mm-hmm. And numbers in many churches have declined to just a handful.
That's
Where's
right.
this going?
I don't know where it's going to go. People do ask me this question. I like to say I'm a historian and not a soothsayer. because one of the things I actually do know as a historian, and that this sense of time teaches me, is that there are surprises along the way. And there have been previous times in American history when it looked like you're going to hang out the sign on Christianity and say out of business, but that didn't happen. Something occurred. And for whatever reason, the story of Jesus and the faith Jesus proclaimed made more sense and became more attractive to some generation down the road. That was surprising. So I would say, well, we hold out for surprise, but we do have to look at the reality of the situation that is around us. And the crisis of Christianity in the United States, it's important to say that it's primarily a crisis of white churches, that the African American churches are declining a little, but nowhere near the level of what white churches are, and there are pockets of growing Christian influence, particularly among Hispanic Americans. And so when we look at decline, many people in this room, it's a matter of looking in the mirror and asking ourselves what is really going wrong in and with white Christianity. And there are lots of interesting suggestions and theories and problems, I think, that are related to that. My very short form answer is I think that white Christianity has been so complicit with the structures of power in this country that we have dug our own grave. And right now, all of those structures are proving themselves ill-equipped to deal with the needs and the crises that younger people around the world are trying to understand and trying to solve. So the global crises around climate, the global crises around economic inequality, the growing crises, I think, around corruption and democracy. These are the things that our children and grandchildren see very clearly and affect them every day. And it appears to them from where they are sitting that Christianity, white Western Christianity, was one of the drivers of all of that. And they do not see answers in those communities. And so it doesn't mean that every community that is a church that has mostly white people is like that, but it does mean that our history has been complicit with some things that have wound up creating massive global problems. And we have not figured how we address that. And I think that that's deeply problematic. And I think that our children and grandchildren are way smarter and see through the smoke screens we tried to put up to hide that. And the best thing that we can do in white communities is to admit where we're wrong and to live better and to live with more faith. Thank you. I really appreciate that question. Yeah, and I think we do have to probably close. Okay, one last hand I saw up over there, so, yeah.
Lesser note, I would just like to say I appreciate your comments this evening and the laying out of the different structures of time. Mm-hmm. Several years ago, maybe 10 or more, I can't remember now, I quit going to Christmas parties held for Christmas. It's amazing. First year or two, they were surprised. Now they don't bother to call, which is fine with me. But if they would have Christmas parties during the 12 days of Christmas, I would be happy to attend them. But it takes a lot of stress off. If you start doing things like that and celebrating the 12 days, you can deliver the presents on any one of those. It doesn't have to be the 25th. That's what I've started doing, and it's just a lot more fun.
That's what I always like, a pragmatist around the Christian year, is that having 12 days for Christmas does indeed take the stress off, and it's just a lot more fun. That's what our medieval ancestors actually knew about that holiday. So anyway, thank you so much. You've been just wonderful tonight. Thank you for the laughter. Thank you for clearly your attention, and I don't know, I just kind of hope I get to be a prophet of an alternative Christianity and get people to really think about at least the different structure. And as you live the different structure, maybe we will find a story that we can tell that will actually make sense amid all of these changes. A story that will make sense to the world, what the world is truly longing for, and a story that finally makes sense to our children and the generations that will come after us, so that one day they'll look at us and say, not that we were the people who blew it, but we were the people who got it. So we've got work to do. Thank you.